Norm, it's almost overwhelming wandering the halls here. Every corner we turn seems to yield something more cool than the last.
I know there are swords, helmets, armor, but most of these things we can't take home.
That's true.
But it turns out Weta has a collectibles department,
Yes.
something near and dear to my heart, where they make things from statues to figurines, and they're also now delving into tabletop games.
Yes, giant killer robots.
You're about to chat with them to learn the process from design to fabrication, using all the techniques that they use for movie making, but now into collectibles that you can take home.
It's really cool. Guys, tell me about giant killer robots. What is going on in this room?
Sure. Giant Killer Robots is a board game that Weta Workshop's undertaking to make.
Okay.
And the world, it's in the title, Giant Killer Robots. So basically, in the future, the old cities like old Detroit, old Los Angeles have been abandoned. People have moved into mega cities. And they decided to recycle the old cities, but instead of just purely recycling, they thought, somebody, bright person in marketing thought, hey, if we're going to recycle them, let's turn this into some kind of combat sport.
Oh.
So they make these giant robots that fight each other, and in that demolition that happens, they not only fight for the salvage rights, so the corporation that wins gets to do the salvage, but you get the entertainment spectacle. So that's Giant Killer Robots. It's a sports metaphor, so you kind of have what's called a heavy hitter, which is what we'll be seeing, and these are the giant killer robots, the big heavy hitter. And then in that sports metaphor, you can put other players in, but they're actually drones. So they'd be like a repair, a grunt, a reconnaissance drone.
So that's about your allocation of resources
exactly.
to support your robot.
Exactly.
Okay.
And so that's the gist of the board game.
That sounds like a lot of fun.
It
as
is
a board
fun.
game.
Yeah.
How does this get developed? You guys have these sort of beautiful designs.
Yep.
And I'm looking at them at multiple scales.
Yes, and so, well, basically we start out like anything, you do some concepts. So for instance, this is a heavy hitter for a corporation called King Wolf, and we did 3 color passes on a particular design. We thought, hey, orange is really popping.
Orange is really
so we went for the orange. And then off of that, after you kind of pick that, then you kind of do this kind of orthographic, like this is actually how it's going to all break down.
So
almost like a model kit kind
Yeah.
of thing, yeah. And then from this, these, you hand it off to our 3D department. So
Okay.
Joel would have taken this and
So yeah, my job's pretty much taking these designs and rebuilding them in a way that we can, actually make them, and everyone's happy with the designs being turned into 3D.
Yeah.
And then once that kind of goes through and everyone's happy with it, we've got a couple of different processes. Like we're taking them to digital game assets and then also to print. So for the print ones, it's a matter of filling everything so there's no hollow spaces and doing like exaggerating the details across the board, like all the bolts and panel lines wouldn't show if they were in the original big scale.
I see.
So it's kind of like
so there's a lot of
redesign.
interpretation that goes on to get them at scale.
Sure,
Yeah.
sure. And then the final game pieces. Is this the size of the final game pieces?
Yep. So we're trying to keep them as big as we can without kind of going overboard.
That's amazing. So this is an example of 2 different scales of the same robot, yes?
Yeah.
So pretty. Look at that.
Yeah, so the actual meshes in which they were made of are completely different meshes and have been made separately.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
And that's because of the manufacturing process and the level of detail?
Yeah.
Like if you blew those
yeah.
bolts up, they end up grossly
Exactly.
large on that.
Yeah.
That is a lot of fine stuff that most people wouldn't realize.
Yeah, there's a whole scaling
Yeah.
issue.
It's like, nothing's really just been scaled, it's kind of been rebuilt for purpose.
Well, this is something model makers deal with all the time
Yeah.
in multiple scales, is that it
Yeah.
doesn't scale, so you can't just pull a 24th or 48th scale model
That's
off the
right.
shelf. You have to
Yeah.
really worry about
That's
how
right.
that detail reads. That's cool. And then how many different robots are you guys producing?
16, I think, at this stage. 4 big ones, and then the smaller versions.
Yeah, so we've got the 4 heavy, what we're calling heavy hitters, and that's, and then we get these little drone guys going.
So these are kind of the scale of the next set. And so that's a full set of 3.
You've got a pocket full of robots.
Yeah, a pocket full of robots that we just like
This
put
is
around.
going to be the future, right? These things like this
Well,
are going to
the amazing thing is really prototyping, because in the past, like trying to figure out like how everything sits all together would have taken months, to product design.
Right, that's the old way, where
Yeah,
it was like someone sculpting these models,
Yeah.
making them carefully.
Right, and now we just, spit these things out really quickly, actually, in the lower fidelity.
Right.
And then we can kind of compare apples and apples in a way to try to make sure that all the scales are right and they all fit like sort of in the same universe.
Well, and there's nothing that goes faster than a meeting in which there's a 3D object to talk about,
100%,
right?
yeah.
It's a 2D, just everyone can look at the same drawing and come to a different shape in their head, but this low res thing allows you to immediately know that's great.
Yeah, and that's something we can print overnight for next to nothing.
Right.
So it's just.
So are you guys? This is brand new technology being used to implement a game like this.
Yeah, it's just definitely helping the development process. I mean, it's just a huge amount faster than it could be.
So once you print them out, what is the next step?
So once we've kind of locked off the design scale of the physical objects, then we hand it over to David Duke,
All right.
who is doing the
Yeah, so once Joel's done with it, then he gives it to me,
Okay.
and I do all the cutting up and keying and readying for printing. Because I run the 2 PolyJet printers here at Weta.
These are the high resolution printers.
Yeah.
So these are the ones you don't want to screw up the print of.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, very much so. So we it doesn't make sense for us many times to print something whole because it's got to be cut up for molding, it's got to be cut up for casting and painting.
I see.
So I cut it up, and then we have to make sure it goes back together again. So it all has to be keyed back together, so everything fits exactly how it's supposed to.
So you're using your classic modeling skills, but in 3D environment,
Yes.
to put back into a natural, real-world environment in order to be able to paint them and mold them and cast them.
Yes.
All right, and then what's the next step after that?
So after that, after I do all the post-processing on each piece, I hand it off to Leonard, and he'll do all the model making.
This is really cool. I mean, you guys are. It's like you probably started making models as a kid, and now you're actually making the models, not just assembling them, right? You're making them from scratch. That's really awesome.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And then there's you get to a level where you just model kits are like, I can use these for parts, but I really want to make something that no one else has made before.
Yeah.
And the best way to do that is to make it yourself.
Yeah.
And with all the technologies that we've got, it's been really great because we can, if something is a few percent too big or too small, we just spit it out again after rescaling, which we've done a few times on these robots actually. But and we're the collectibles department that we're bringing all these game pieces through. So Weta's really well known for our collectibles. So it's been an important thing to keep the really high quality. So that's been a lot of talking with David as he cuts them up on the best way to cut them up to get them out the molds and for manufacturing.
Each
so
piece will be completely different. So you have to approach it, kind of with fresh eyes and what is the best way to get it to come apart so that it molds properly and you're getting the best cast and the painters can get in there and don't have to fight trying to get around certain areas. So it works for everybody.
And then there's the paint job, which is these beautiful, weathered, worn paint jobs. They look like real objects. That's a whole narrative in and of itself. You guys, it's got to be a lot of working in real hand-in-glove concert to make sure that the story you're telling is really consistent across all of these.
That's right, yeah, exactly. And the funny thing here was that we started off with King Wolf, this guy here in orange, and then we moved on to Thunder Happy, this blue guy here, and then we ended up doing Hammer Strike, the green guy. But what's interesting is we kind of ended up coming around the horn, so probably the best looking guy here is this Diamondback guy. And it was just essentially by the time that in the prototyping process of the guys painting it, they'd just gotten to where they were nailing it.
It's
just
beautiful.
Yeah.
This is just absolutely gobsmackingly lovely. I'll tell you on camera, I know it's looking good on camera, I know, but I'll tell you in person, it looks twice as good. That is, it's got to be really satisfying to be able to work at the multiple scales.
Yes, 100%. Yeah, just to go from essentially what was this, a drawing, a painting, and then you end up with that in the end, and it's just, it's very, very satisfying.
Have you guys released these to the public yet, or is it just about to happen?
Just about to happen. I think we plan to go out the gate with Kickstarter to try to get some funding as far as getting the money to cash together to go to manufacture. So, but yeah, we're close.
That's great. Good luck. This is absolutely gorgeous work. Thank you, guys.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.